Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be participating with this great list of speakers. And today I'm going to talk to you about dance on the brain, training for intra and interbrain synchrony. So I'm very interested in dance from the perspective of it as an enriched form of physical activity, right? We were just kind of coming from Aga's talk, coming from a little bit of that perspective where we have dance as a physical activity enhancing cardiopulmonary health, but it's also this form of physical activity whereby socio-emotional aspects are incorporated, creative aspects are incorporated. We're in training to rhythms of music. And so we're interested in investigating the impacts that has on socio-emotional health. So to get us started, I just wanted to introduce myself. So I'm Dr. Julia Basso. I'm a neuroscientist, dancer, and yoga instructor. So movement has always been at the core of my practices personally. And then as I started my lab, the Embodied Brain Lab, I'm at Virginia Tech, we started to be interested in many of these questions surrounding dance, surrounding mind-body movement practices in general, like yoga and mindfulness meditation. And we're looking to investigate how these practices impact brain health and wellness, brain function and physiology. EEG, or electroencephalography, is our tool of choice, and we're always interested in the core at the behavioral changes. And we're also interested in how these practices can help us to optimize the motivation to engage in physical activity and other healthy behaviors. So in starting out, when we think about the body and mind connection, this connection happens very early on in utero, as a matter of fact. And so there have been some studies by Bujaki and team looking at when this connection between body and brain emerges. And it's very early on in utero when the fetus is able to have movement. The movements of the body actually propel the brain into these things called cortical rhythms or cortical spindles. And you can see that here as the little pup, we're looking at a rat pup, is moving. It's these movements of the body that actually propel the brain and vice versa. So this rhythm of body movement is very important for brain development at our very earliest stages. And now I want to take you through a trajectory of how these kind of bodily movements progress throughout the course of our neurodevelopmental patterns or our neurodevelopmental trajectory, but also how they're linked in evolution and how they're linked in how we codify them in dance. So one of the first patterns of movement to emerge is breath. And evolutionarily speaking, right, we have these organisms that begin to respirate and utilize oxygen and start to utilize the breath, right, the respiration for energy. In a newborn, it's one of our first patterns of movement to emerge. It's not considered often or taken into account that breath is a form of movement, but it's a very important form of movement and one that helps us to regulate our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And it emerges about 10 seconds after birth. Of course, in dance and through the patterns of total body connectivity, we codify these things through techniques like pranayama, all of our important breathing practices that as dancers, we know, right, are very important in our movement practices. Next, and if we had more time, right, it's always great to practice some of these movement practices as we're going through this more cognitive-based lecture, but we have navel radiation. So evolutionarily speaking, this comes on board with our starfish. And here, the starfish, right, is radiating out from the center. And in babies, we start to see this in the first few months of after birth, whereby they have what's called the Moro reflex, they'll startle. And then in dance, right, we have access to all of these limbs, the four limbs, the arms and legs that we have. And so navel radiation or core distal radiation is the next step in the neurodevelopmental pattern of movement. From here, we go into spinal or head-tail movement. And evolutionarily speaking, that comes along with our fish ancestors, whereby there's this lateral flexion of the spine from left to right. In babies, it's very important as they start to be able to push up on their arms, and they have that head-tail connection. In dance and movement yoga practices, we can practice our cat-cow movement of the spine and even that lateral flexion, the wagging of the tail. And so it's based on this central axis of the spine, which emerges around 3 months of age. And here it's very important because it helps us to begin to utilize the eyes, to look around our world, to start to engage with some of the cognitive stuff that is happening out there in the world. Next, we have these homolateral patterns of movement or body half. Evolutionarily speaking, it comes on board with our lizard friends. And so they're moving left to right, emerging from the water out onto land. And in babies, importantly, then once they can push up on hands, then they get to push up on hands and knees. So they can now crawl through and navigate the space. This is a very important neurodevelopmental time point because the baby, the child, can begin to circumnavigate, spatially navigate their environment. And so the hippocampus, a portion of the brain in the temporal lobe, it's very important for spatial navigation, understanding where we are in place and space. So some of these neurodevelopmental abilities or cognitive abilities come on board. It's emerging around 9 months of age. And then in dance, right, as dancers, it allows us to ground on one side and then lift through the opposite side. Next up, we have the homologous patterns. So homologous patterns comes to us during evolution as frogs evolve, and they're jumping, they're leaping from the back to the front. In babies, this is important because we're crawling and then we can go into standing. So now all of a sudden we have access to, again, looking around the world, ability to use the hands to grasp at objects. The neurocognitive development is beginning to progress as we're able to do this. And in dance, we can, of course, reach up and then touch toes. That's one example of homologous movement from upper to lower body. But another way is by using our hands. So in handstands, cartwheels, any of those fun inversions that we love to do. Now, the most advanced form of physical activity or physical movement patterns is the contralateral or diagonal pattern. So this emerges when we're able to cross our midline. And there's this diagonal ability moving through space. So evolutionarily speaking, this is with our ape ancestors as they're able to navigate through the trees, their arms become available and they can travel all through space. In humans and other creatures, it's all about walking and our bipedal human abilities, right? We can now walk through the space. So even though we all, walk, use our feet for moving through this space, this is, in fact, our most evolutionarily developed form of movement. In dance, this can take shape into jumps, curves, turns, things like that. Now, one of the things that I've recently added to the literature and I'm very excited about is this idea of movement synchrony. So all of those total patterns of body connectivity that we talk about in dance are all at the individual level. And I want to talk today really about the importance of movement synchrony, that partnership in dance that we see. Here we see a few examples, right, of mama and baby, daddy and baby. In their very earliest stages, they're connecting, right? They're connecting through their eyes. They're looking at one another. They're connecting through smiles, through gaze, maybe through giggles and sounds. And so this idea of being in connection, being in communication with others is very important. Something that we noted in our paper, Dance on the Brain, we said as humans, some of our first successful interactions with the world depend on imitation. Imitation is an important feature of human development because it's through imitation that we develop social cognition, which enables us to understand another's thoughts and feelings and share our conscious experiences with one another. So we kind of have this ability to connect with one another on a physical level, which ends up and is shown to be correlated with socio-emotional behaviors and development later on in life. Now, when we think about the brain and how is it that these things are happening, right? We gaze at one another, we move together, we smile and laugh. You notice when you're in conversation with somebody, you might be taking on a lot of their similar movement patterns or habits, smiling when they're smiling. And how this emerges at the level of the brain is through the rhythms of the brain. The brain operates in an electrical fashion. It produces action potentials. And when we look at the brain through electroencephalography, we see these rhythms of the brain, these sine waves, that when we decompose the sine wave, we break it down into its component parts. And you can see them here. Delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. And what you might notice about these rhythms of the brain is that they go from very slow, large amplitude rhythms to faster, lower amplitude rhythms. And so each of these different waveforms or states of the brain are associated, or essentially associated with different types of cognitive capacities, abilities, things that we're doing. So when I'm getting very tired and sleepy and going into even a deep sleep, you're going to see the brain go into a lot of these delta rhythms, slow rhythms. But say right now, I'm giving a talk, I'm activated, I'm thinking about what's next, right? My brain is going to be more in this beta or gamma state whereby, I'm doing a thing, I'm concentrated, I'm focused. So the brain is quite active, and it's going to emerge as these faster rhythms. And when we think about the brain of two individuals interacting, there is this term, this idea called inter-brain synchrony. So, of course, when we're interacting with others, we don't only have one brain, we have two or multiple brains interacting. And so there's this idea of inter-brain synchrony. And many research studies now to date have shown that the brain rhythms of individuals start to become synchronized when we're doing different things. So right now, even as we're listening to each other, we're engaging in that kind of teacher, student, lecture fashion. Our brains start to become synchronized. And the literature has shown that there are particular brain regions that this occurs in, often the frontal brain regions and the temporal parietal, this temporal parietal junction. It keeps coming up in the literature. And studies have shown that the brain kind of synchronizes between individuals during creativity tasks, joint finger tapping, math tasks, singing. Newer literature has shown group drumming during drum circles. And so the literature and people are starting to get interested in art forms, all art forms, as kind of this co-creative process. And we're certainly interested in that. How can we use art and dance as a way to co-create and get our brain rhythms more in sync with one another so that we can connect on a socio-emotional level? And, as dancers, we know that as we're moving with others, as we're practicing our art form with others, that often you end up having this kind of social connection with others in your dance team, group, those on the stage. So we're very curious about what is going on at the level of the brain to promote these things. And in dance, right, we train this kind of interpersonal coordination. We connect with one another through movement. Here is kind of an image of us showing the process of mirroring. Mirroring is something we're very interested in, whereby, say, if one of the dancers is moving, I think I might be moving here, and then my partner, Rachel, she's following me deeply and intently and trying to see how she can coordinate with me. Of course, then we would switch. Rachel would be the leader, and then I would follow. And then our next level is, okay, what if there's no leader or follower and we just co-move? What does that do? So you can see this is kind of our apparatus, what the setup looks like. You have two individuals. We're recording brain activity. We're recording heart rate and some of the other physiological parameters that emerge from the body. And then we're moving together in a space that is a dance studio. So the intervention and some of our interventions can feel very, very much like you're having, a yoga or dance experience. So I developed the Synchronicity Hypothesis of Dance sometime back in 2021, and we've been really working to investigate this hypothesis and all of the studies that have come since this paper. And what the hypothesis states essentially is that when we're dancing, when we're moving, and at the beginning of the talk, I had talked about dance as this enriched form of physical activity, right? Of course, it has sensory and motor components, just like running on a treadmill, going for a hike, these things. But there's also cognitive aspects to it. We're we're thinking, we're learning choreography, we're moving through the space in coordinated ways. There's rhythmic features, we're often in training to music. There's these social and emotional features to it. We're engaging with others. We may be having emotional experiences. And then there's creative aspects. So we're creating movements new, or we're doing improvisational movement, which requires high levels of creativity. So the idea is that, okay, all of these brain regions are involved in this behavior. And when we engage in dance, this enriched form of movement practice, that the information flow between these brain areas, sensory motor, for example, cognitive and motor, are all starting to link. The neural synchrony within the brain is becoming heightened. That means the flow of information in these brain regions increases. So that's part one of the hypothesis. And part two is that when we dance with others, essentially what happens is we have all these brains with the hyper kind of connectivity and flow of information occurring. And then we dance with others and we start to synchronize brain rhythms between one another, the inter-brain synchrony piece. So we're enhancing intra-brain synchrony at the individual level and inter-brain synchrony as we co-create. And essentially what we're hypothesizing is that these mechanisms, these neural mechanisms, are promoting that socio-emotional connection that we feel. So this is the hypothesis we've been exploring. And then who have we been exploring it in? So one of the groups that we've been exploring it in is mothers and their children, and in particular, mothers with depression. And so we've been seeing a lot of moms come through our program, and we've been looking at moms who have moderate to severe levels of stress, depression, or anxiety. It so happens that is if you're a mom and you're kind of sifting through your experience, it can be stressful. It can be a stressful experience. And so with mothers, about 1 in 5 women suffer from a maternal mental health disorder like postpartum depression. So this is kind of our group of interest that we're studying. And when we think about the mother, there's not only the mother, right? There's this mother-child dyad. So the child is integral to what is going on, right? It's this dyadic experience. The mother's health is essential to the child's health and vice versa, right? So it's this partnership that we're studying. And I want to show you data, and it's kind of hot off the press data, from a study that we just recently ran in mothers and their children. Again, this is mothers. We had 26 dyads come through this program. So mothers with a self-reported mood disorder. I said high levels, moderate to high levels of stress, depression, or anxiety, and their children. So they came to us. They were interested in our program. And they were randomly assigned. So we run all of our trials essentially as randomized controlled trials. And they were randomly assigned to either our mother-child dance group or our mother-child free play group. So we set up a whole experience for them in the control group that had toys, arts and crafts, books, and even one of the we're in Southwest Virginia here, so there's not that many opportunities. And even with the free play opportunity that they had, one of the children would say, "Oh, are we going to the Children's Museum today?" So we had it set up very nicely for them. Our experimental group was Mother-Child Dance, and this is a program that incorporates Anne Green Gilbert's The Brain Dance. We had a very particular curriculum, and what we did was that it was a 2-week intervention. So it was summertime, and what we decided to do, because we partner with the Blacksburg Dance Theater, and in Blacksburg, Virginia. And so they run a lot of summer camps. And I thought, okay, well, originally our intervention had been for a whole month. And I said, well, listen, a lot of mamas out there are looking for summer camp opportunities. So let's just fold this in and make this a summer camp opportunity. So it was 2 weeks long. They came every day, five times per day, and 45-week duration. So we split out all these groups throughout the day. So we're really working hard to kind of make this a fun experience for moms and their kiddos. And before and after the intervention, we ran a whole variety of behavioral tests. So we did a variety of psychological assessments to assess mood and assess the maternal-child relationship, mother-child relationship, and also the child's behavior. And then we recorded their brain activity. So this is now the dyad. If you remember me and Rachel dancing together, well, now this is mama and baby. And this is them doing all different kinds of interactive experiences. So we had them play together, we had them have a conversation together, we had them dance together. And then one of our other outcomes that we're interested in looking at is immunoglobulins and cytokines. So we test their saliva to look at kind of the immune markers in the body. And I'm not going to talk to you about that today, but we have some interesting results there as well. So I'm going to be talking to you about these two outcomes here. And first, what we're going to show you is the psychological outcomes. And so what we're looking at here, in green, we have our dance. And in yellow, we have the control. And you can see the psychological outcomes on the x-axis and their mean change scores on the y-axis. So what we're seeing is that for the mother-child dance group, right, when we're looking at these comparisons, we see that the mother-child dance intervention decreases depression, which was our primary outcome of interest. So we were pleased to see that. And that came not only in the Beck depression inventory, but also on the DSM-5 cross-cutting measures assessment. So we saw decreases in depression in two arenas. We also saw a decrease in parental stress, which was wonderful. And then I'm going to jump over here, an increase in positive affect. And this is often what we see with our dance interventions. We see decreases in negative affect and increases in positive affect. And then we see an improvement in the parent-child relationship. So we're very excited about those outcomes. And when we looked at the impact on intra-brain synchrony, and here we're looking at some lower frequency bands, theta in particular. Here's the child and mother at pre-test, and this is at post-test. So the effect really was more prominent for mama, which, the intervention was kind of focused on the mother. So we were excited to see, and that there's a lot of increases in intra-brain synchrony between the frontal areas and some of the parietal. So a lot of these cognitive areas, and this is while they're playing together. This is while mama and baby are playing together. So we see an increase in the intra-brain. And then what about interbrain? I was really excited to see this. I know my video is kind of blocking us here, but this is some of our newest data. So again, this line on the top is pre-test and on bottom is post-test. So our next step is to quantify this data, but here we're looking at imaginary coherence, the coherence between brain activity for all these different electrode sites. Whenever you see a red line, that's indicating significance. And you can see, especially in theta, there is a lot more brain coherence after the intervention. So we were really excited about this, and we're going to start to dig deeper. This is during play, just like the intra-brain synchrony was during play. So we have all other kinds of behavioral things to look at, but this is our first go at it. And so in conclusion, we're finding that dance helps to improve, in this instance, maternal mental health and enhance that mother-child relationship. We're seeing increases in intra and interbrain synchrony between this important dyad, and the future analyses are going to focus on that relationship. And I just wanted to end with this quote from one of our dance participants, mamas. I think working on movement with my child, who I love, but who can be a source of stress, was enjoyable. We have used some of the songs and movements in challenging moments since, and we reconnect well and redirect for behavior. So ultimately, that's what it's all about, the qualitative piece, that they're going home and taking these interventions into their own hands and continuing. So I would just like to acknowledge all the wonderful students in my lab, Noor Tasnim, Mackenzie Aikman. This is her master's thesis work. Dr. Daniel English in the English Laboratory, and all of my sponsors, and open it up to questions. Thank you so much.
Great talk. I always manage to forget to unmute myself. So we have some time for questions. I think Asaf is already getting ready to.
Yes, thank you, Julia. It's a great talk and a beautiful project. Can you tell us more about the content and the structure of the the parent-child dance intervention? Like what is your approach there?
What is the content of it? Sure. So it's a 45-minute class in duration, and it's bookended by a hello and goodbye song. So we always do a welcome and get everybody to settle in the space. The beginning, we always have themes that we work on. So for example, if there is a theme of shape, we might work on, a partnership duet. Mama creates a shape, child fits into it. So there's a lot of interactive experiences, essentially. They're improvisational experiences. So it's not, for example, a situation where a teacher is standing up at the front doing a pirouette, and then the mom and baby are kind of trying to follow along. It's all about interactivity and cultivating experiences whereby we have one called clay and sculpture. So for example, the idea would be that the child puts mama, who's a piece of clay, into a shape, and then baby moves around and gets to create a dance. And then they switch it up. So we always have kind of co-sharing of leader and follower. And there are more experiences whereby we're creating these dances improvisationally. And then at the end, there's always a shavasana cool down. We use some props like blankets, and we do like taco baby and swing the baby. So there's always opportunities. There's a warm up and cool down. We had incorporated some obstacle courses whereby we put out a variety of objects and have mom and baby navigate around that and create a dance around that. So all interactive experiences.
Awesome. More questions? Yes, Julia.
Yeah. Really great talk and interesting project. Maybe you can't see me. I'm well, hi.
The owl will find you eventually.
Yeah. Actually, just was this with music? And if yes, what music did you use? And what do you think that makes of a difference, if any, to have music in there for that synchrony?
Yeah, that is a really important piece and a question that we always get asked. So the dance class, yes, it did have music, and we were playing like a children's music radio, essentially. So we have all of those, and we would play the same music in the control group. So that would just be playing in the background. In our behavioral experiences where we're looking at EEG, we did do a comparison that was dance versus music only. And we've yet to explore that data, but we're very curious. And we're doing that in studies now. So it is one of our premier control groups is a music only or music listening group, because we're very curious about, the importance of music and what that does to the brain. And then what does dance do on top of that? So it's a great question and something we're thinking about, but I don't have any data on it at the moment.
Oh, good. You seem to have a lot in there already. Another follow-up from that. Are they encouraged to follow along to the beat in any way, or do you have any measure of how much of the time the individuals have actually engaged into the beat or something like that?
Well, there are a few instances, like, for example, if we're using a prop like drums or something like that, where, the teacher might create a beat and then the mommies and children will in tune or in train to that. But that's not a real focus. That's not a real focus of the intervention.
Thank you. Good luck with all that.
Great. Yeah, super impressive. And I think on that note, that's a great moment to end the day. So thank you so much, Julia, once again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.